Have you ever thought about what would happen if the internet just stopped? I mean, not just your home Wi-Fi, but huge, critical pieces of it all going dark at once. Well, we don't have to wonder. It actually happened. This is the story of how one single failure showed us just how fragile our digital world really is, and how that crisis kicked off a race to build a completely new kind of internet. All right, let's get into it. The date you need to remember is October 20th, 2025. Yeah, this was the day. The day the digital world got a massive and very public wake-up call. It was the moment we all had to admit that the systems we rely on every single second were way more fragile than we thought. And I'm not being dramatic here. A single point of failure, one little problem in one place, created a massive ripple effect that was felt across the entire globe. So you have to ask yourself, how is that even possible? To really understand what went wrong, we have to zoom in on the event that exposed the flaw in the first place, the huge Amazon Web Services, or AWS, outage. This wasn't just some minor server glitch. This was a fundamental, systemic breakdown. And just like that, so many of the apps and services that are woven into our daily lives just vanished. Your game of Fortnite, your Snapchats to your friends, your Ring doorbell security, even your Amazon Prime Video. And for businesses, thousands of stores running on Shopify just went offline. This wasn't just an inconvenience. For countless companies, it was a total shutdown. So what was the culprit? It was a system most of us never think about, but it's absolutely critical. It's called the Domain Name System, or DNS. The easiest way to think about it is like the internet's giant phone book. When you type in a website, DNS is the thing that looks up the right number, the IP address, so your computer knows where to go. So, what happens when that phone book just disappears? Well, this is the insane part. The problem started with a DNS failure in just one single AWS region, US East 1, which is in Virginia. But because a ridiculous number of services all relied on that one phone book, they couldn't find anything. They couldn't connect to their own data, even if that data was sitting in perfectly healthy data centers somewhere else. A local problem in Virginia knocked out services around the entire planet. And that leads us to a much bigger and, honestly, a much scarier realization. This outage wasn't really an accident. It was a symptom of a system that was, in a way, designed to fail. And the root of the problem is one word: centralization. This whole mess forced us to confront some pretty tough truths. It showed us, in no uncertain terms, that by relying on just a few giant data hubs, we've created these massive single points of failure. We saw that the domino effect isn't just a theory, it's very, very real. And all of this is happening on a network that was already struggling to keep up with the amount of data we're all pushing through it. Look, don't just take my word for it. A major strategic report on this whole thing put it bluntly. The conclusion is, quote, unambiguous. Centralized hosting just isn't a viable option for the critical stuff we depend on. The risk is simply too high to ignore anymore. So if the way we've built the internet is basically a house of cards, what's the alternative? Is there a better, smarter, more resilient way to do this? Well, according to a growing number of people, the answer is a definite yes. And this is where a really fascinating idea comes into play: a truly decentralized internet, which some people are calling Web 4. This specific vision we're looking at comes from a group called DV Ununity, which is part of a company called Linkspreed. And it's not just a small tweak, it's a completely different way of thinking about how the internet should work. This slide right here just nails the difference. On the left, that's the internet we have now, Web 2. Everything flows through a few giant, centralized hubs. You knock one of them over, and you get chaos. But on the right, you have Web 4. It's a distributed mesh, a web of countless smaller nodes. There's no single point of failure to attack or for things to go wrong. It's built to be resilient right from the start. So how do you even begin to build something like this? Well, you have to start right at the bottom, at the very foundation. You have to replace the core rules that dictate how data moves around. And that's where Project IPX, or Internet Protocol Exchange, comes in. Now, this comparison is just fantastic. Our old system, legacy IP, is what's called a hub-and-spoke model. Think of it like all traffic in a city being forced to go through one central roundabout. It's inefficient and super fragile. IPX, on the other hand, is a mesh. It's more like a grid of city streets. If there's a traffic jam on one street, data just automatically finds a different route. It's way more resilient and way more efficient. But building a better internet isn't just about how data moves around. It's also about who controls our identity online. Let's be real. Right now, our digital identities are basically owned by companies like Google and Amazon. This next piece of the puzzle, called UIID, is designed to fix that. So how does this actually work? Well, first, your identity is decoupled. That means it isn't tied to any one company. It's yours, and you can take it with you anywhere. That gives you full user control. You're in the driver's seat of your own data. And finally, the system is smart. It gives you a secure core ID for important stuff, like banking, but lets you use anonymous aliases for everything else. You get real security and real privacy. Okay, so we've got the tech, a new network protocol with IPX, and a new way to handle identity with UIID. These are the building blocks for a much safer, more resilient web. The big question is, what's the game plan to actually make it happen? The recommendation is really clear. It's time to make a major pivot towards decentralization. That means starting to use new protocols like IPX so we're not so dependent on these central choke points. It means seriously looking at systems like UIID for a future-proof way to handle identity. And fundamentally, it means shifting our entire mindset away from this vulnerable centralized model and toward a resilient decentralized mesh. You know that AWS outage in 2025 wasn't just a technical glitch, it was a warning shot. It forced all of us to see just how shaky the foundations of our digital world really are. The move to a decentralized Web 4 using tech like IPX and UIID isn't just an upgrade, it's a totally different philosophy. And it leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. The internet we have today was built, for the most part, to serve the needs of a few giant corporations. So who will this next internet be built for?